This is the Snodgrass podcast. Welcome to a new podcast episode. I got a great guest, Josh Cantwell out of Cleveland, Ohio today. But before I talk about Josh, go over to YouTube and subscribe to the Snodgrass YouTube channel and leave a comment. And I'm going to reply to all the comments on this channel. So I love you guys' constructive feedback. Who is Josh Cantwell? Well, Josh is an amazing entrepreneur. He's always been an entrepreneur, learned lessons from his dad as his dad was an entrepreneur. And today he owns thousands of apartment units. He raises hundreds of millions of dollars in private money that is deployed into his apartment units. But today we really dive into a more vulnerable topic because Josh was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer at the age of 36. This is 10 years later now that he's been diagnosed. He's cancer-free and he survived pancreatic cancer. So we dive into the lessons that he learned from having pancreatic cancer and facing his own mortality. We also learn lessons from his dad who passed away last year. And this is a vulnerable episode. It's pretty real. It's pretty raw. Now here is Josh Cantwell. What's going on, Josh?
Not too much, Brett. What's up, man? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Love hearing your story. I know you've been in the real estate space for longer than I have, many years, and some of my greatest friends have been your students, and you've been teaching multifamily for years now, and you're just so successful. You're a true entrepreneur, and I love your story. But I always start off with this question, Josh, and that is this: who is Josh Cantwell?
Oh man, great question. I would say, look, father, son, entrepreneur, Christian, servant, son of God, pancreatic cancer survivor, lucky and blessed. That is me, man. I'm conservative, conservative in my decisions, conservative about life. I like things that I can count on that have been around. I like history. I love to do things that create cash flow, and I'm all in on my faith, and I'm all in on my family and my kids. That's me, man. That's me. And real estate's just a tool. It's just an investment vehicle to give me the freedom to do that stuff.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that you say that real estate's a vehicle. It's been a great vehicle for you. It's been a very fast vehicle, and it's just been awesome. And when I was reading about you, that you've kind of always been an entrepreneur, and you said that you've never had a boss in your adult life.
Right.
You've always worked for yourself, and that's kind of like me. People ask me, I don't even know how to do an interview to get a job because I've never really done that. And, I think I practiced it when I was in college, but I'm kind of like you. I've always been in that entrepreneurial spirit. And so talk to us about your entrepreneurial journey. Where'd you learn that from? And where'd you get that?
So it really starts like a long time ago. Long story short, I was very fortunate that my dad was not only just a great guy, but he bet on himself. He was in sales for an insurance company, and I witnessed him take over a division of that business and build it from 2 employees to 40 employees, build it with a partner, eventually buy out his partner. And so I witnessed entrepreneurship in my own house, Brett. I think that's what, if I could help other people, a lot of people don't have an entrepreneurial mentor. If they could grow up the way I grew up, my parents also filed for bankruptcy when I was in 6th grade, right? So between the time I was in 6th grade to the time I got into high school, my dad got this job working for this insurance company. To the time I was in my late high school years and early college years, I saw my dad go from bankrupt to multimillionaire in a very short, less than 5 to 7 years. I witnessed him build this business while I was in college, while he was putting me through college and my other 2 older brothers through college at the same time. I witnessed him get up early, leave for work at 7, get home at 7. So I was very fortunate, Brett, to see what he did right, what he did wrong. Mm-hmm. And so I took a lot of the lessons I learned from him in him betting on himself and realizing that nobody was coming to his rescue, that he was 100% responsible for his life. And then I wanted to take that to the next level and say, well, how do I want this entrepreneurship to look for me? I got out of college. I actually became a financial advisor. I did really well with that. But the number one lesson I learned from being a financial advisor is most of my successful clients had their money in real estate. not in the stock market, not in bonds, but in real estate. That's what got me into the real estate space. And ultimately, I learned watching my dad that I wanted to take the lessons I learned from him of entrepreneurship, but then also not work from 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. every day, right? To take that one step further, to be kind of the next generation of entrepreneur, not the old school version, but the next generation of entrepreneur, where I worked more with my mind than with my time, or with my mind and my hands, and was able to create businesses over the years. And I've had a lot of ups and downs, more ups than downs, thank God. But I was very lucky. Like we take it for granted, first of all, that we're born in the United States, right? Look at all the stuff going on in Afghanistan, China, all these other places, Cuba. People want to come here. So, but I was also very lucky to be born in a very conservative Christian household, and very lucky to be born with an entrepreneurial dad. So those things, man, like all come together. That's why I say, when you ask me who am I lucky and blessed, because all those things come together. I'm very, very fortunate. You can't take that for granted.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things I do is I love to do missions trips, and I go down to Guatemala quite a bit. But yeah, I always say, take my daughter down there, and I think she kind of gets some of that perspective, gets it, because she didn't choose to be born in the United States. I didn't choose. None of us chose that, and we could have been born somewhere else and been born with the deck stacked against us. And so I totally agree. Totally lucky and blessed, and awesome that you had a dad kind of mentor you. We're going to talk about him a little bit later as well. Some other lessons about him. But before I get into that, so again, true entrepreneur, very, very successful man, millions of dollars, and you're in your 30s. You had been very, very successful teaching and buying houses, flipping houses, apartment buildings, wholesaling. I think you've done it all. And then something happened around 36 or so years old. So talk to us about that.
Yeah. Well, I think, Brett, like a lot of guys, I'm at work, come home, I get with two small kids, two small girls. They were 2 years old and 1 year old at the time. And I was wrestling with them in the living room, and I rolled over on my back. I was looking up at the ceiling fan, and I crossed my hands across my stomach, and I felt this giant lump on the left side of my stomach. And I said, wow, that's really in a weird place. Like, it's kind of really hard and kind of off to the left and kind of misshaped, kind of weird looking. So I went over to my wife. I said, Lisa, come over here. Like, check this out. Like, she starts poking around. It's like, man, that looks weird. Like, I don't know. So I call my aunts. They're all nurses. I call my buddy, orthopedic surgeon across the street. They're all like, yeah, it's in a weird spot. It's not a hernia. It's not anything I've seen before. Got to go get checked out. Well, my son, at that time, my wife was 8 months pregnant, and he had some complications when he was due to be born. He had a big cyst in his neck, and they were afraid he wasn't going to be able to breathe. So my wife had an emergency C-section. As soon as my son was born, they kind of whisked him away to a different operating room to make sure he could breathe. We didn't see him. He was born at 7 a.m. We didn't see him until 5 o'clock at night. But by the blessing of God, he was able to breathe. He had surgery 2 weeks later, took this big lump out of his neck, this big cyst. And then finally, I went to go to the doctor to get this thing checked out, whatever was in my stomach. And I knew it was there now for 2 months, but didn't want to bother with it because my son was being born. So I put him first. I took a back seat. Now it was time for me to go get it checked out. And sure enough, I went into the doctor. He's poking around. I said, well, let's just, let's get a CT scan. Let's just see what's going on. That was on a Friday, end of the day. Monday morning, I got the phone call, and it was 8 in the morning, 8:05. It was my daughter's, who is now 3, her first day ever of preschool. Okay, so we're all excited. She's going to her first day of preschool. Yeah. Wife is going. She's going for a half day. We get the call at 8 in the morning, and the hospital's like, Josh, you got to come to the hospital immediately. And I looked at my wife, kind of joking around. I said, well, that can't be good, And sure enough, I walked into the doctor's office. He said, Josh, you see this, this is the screen. This is the CT scan of your belly. See this big gray mass here, Josh? This isn't supposed to be here. I'm sorry to tell you, but you have pancreatic cancer. And not only that, but it was as big as a basketball, Brett. It was 12 inches by 10 by 11. It was massive. It was as big as your head. It was very advanced, and it was wrapped up in all my other organs. Same exact diagnosis as Steve Jobs, right? So, man, 35 years old, 36 years old, you think you can conquer the world. You think you're working late, you're working hard, but you're still partying with your friends and staying up late. You're having a young family and you're doing well in business. You think you got it all figured out until you don't, until you don't.
Yeah.
And when that happens, man, it turns your world upside down in a hurry and you got to start figuring shit out.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So what was kind of going through your mind? You heard this diagnosis, and like I said, you mentioned Steve Jobs, which obviously we all know how that ended. But here you are in your prime, right? I mean, typically a working man is prime is his 30s and possibly 40s. You're in your prime, and then now you're facing kind of this mortality, because I was looking up pancreatic cancer. I don't know a lot about pancreatic cancer, but I know it is one of the worst diagnoses of cancer, at least, right? So what's going through your mind at this time? I know it probably took you, you're stunned, but maybe a couple weeks, few weeks to think about it even, but what are you thinking about?
Probably the blessing of my son being born kind of disguised the severity of what had happened with this diagnosis, because every day I would think about myself, but then I looked over and there's my newborn son who just had surgery. There's my wife that just had emergency C-section. There's my 3-year-old daughter and my 2-year-old who just started preschool. So, it's the distraction of all of that young family and business probably helped me and my wife. My wife says often, like, well, Josh, I didn't pay attention to you anyway because I had a newborn son, right? So what a blessing that was for both of us to be in a pretty significant diagnosis, but distracted by a newborn. And so what kind of really punched me in the face, what really hit me in the face, I remember when I was getting ready for the surgery, the surgeon wanted to do the surgery right away. I'm like, I can't do it right away. I've got to get a few things in order, my business in order. I had to tell my employees, I had to plan things up with my wife and what we're going to do. So I pushed it off for about 6 weeks, but then when it was time to have surgery, I planned it right the week of Thanksgiving, because I knew that nobody would know I was out, because everybody's busy with Thanksgiving. Nobody would know I was gone. But the week before surgery, I remember sitting down with the surgeon and his assistant, and I had to sign this giant waiver that said all these things could happen, right? You could be paralyzed on the operating table. You could die on the operating table. You could have a heart attack on the operating table. We might not be able to do the surgery at all. I remember signing that like I was literally signing my life away. Like I don't know what to do or how to handle this, but signing my life away. And I'm thinking in my head, like, oh my God, what is going on now? And then going into the surgery itself, like I felt pretty good. I felt pretty confident. I felt like I'm a young guy, like this is going to work. But man, I had no clue what was about to happen. And I really didn't know until about 6 weeks later, after the surgery happened and recovery. A whole nother story there. But January 3rd, I remember rolling into my oncologist's office, Brett, and his name is Dr. Ali, and he walks in. He's like, hey, Josh, I heard you had the surgery. How did things go? He's like, we talked for a brief second. Then he's like, hey, Josh, let me read this report, right? So he opens up his computer, like we're talking now. He's staring at his computer. He's reading through it. And he's reading for like a really long time. I'm like, what is he reading? Like what? And he looks at me. He's like, and he kind of looks back at the screen and kind of looks over, kind of sits back in his chair. And he says, Josh, I've never seen anything like this before. It's like, your surgeon, Dr. Walsh, is a daring surgeon. And I thought to myself, like, what do you mean? And he went on to explain. He's like, Josh, listen, they took out your stomach, your gallbladder, your spleen, most of your pancreas, most of your liver. They had to reconstruct the arteries in the back of your leg to go in take them from your leg and put them in the back of your liver, because all those were crushed by the cancer. The cancer mass was as big as a basketball. It was resting up against your other organs that were essentially sewn together. He had to cut all that out. I had to relearn how to eat. I couldn't keep down any major food for 6 months. But he's like, I've never seen anything like this before. And he's like, this is the reason why I sent you to Dr. Walsh, because I knew if anybody could pull this off, it would be him. And those words, Brett, like this, be daring, like this, just kept thinking of that. Like, what do you mean? And like, I just thought, because Dr. Walsh never told me during recovery everything he did. Mm-hmm. It never came out. I got it out. That's all he said. I got it out. Well, I didn't know he took everything else.
Right.
Or how complicated it was. I mean, to give you an idea, Brett, as you and I record this right now, you have 7 units of blood in your entire body. Mm. On the operating table, they cycled 21 units of blood through my body on the operating table. The surgery was 10 hours.
Wow.
So I have everybody else's blood in my body except my own. Right? It's just an absolutely wicked surgery. But I was able to recover. I was able to get back on my feet. I was able to put weight back on. I was able to relearn how to eat. And here we are 10 years later. And one of the only reasons why I'm here was God chose to give me a second chance. And Dr. Walsh was there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty amazing stuff.
That is amazing. And he put that doctor right there to take the risks. Because I think when I was watching your video, he said most doctors would have sewn you back up and said, there's nothing we can do.
That's what Dr. Ali said. Actually, right there, after he was done talking about the surgery, how amazing it was, he said, Dr. Walsh is a daring surgeon. He says, most surgeons would have never even tried this, Josh. They would have seen how the cancer was wrapped up in all the other organs, and your arteries were crushed, and you would have, all this stuff had to be taken out. And, most surgeons would have never even tried that surgery. Yeah. They would have sewn you back up and sent you home and said, there's nothing we can do. And then I started thinking like how much did Dr. Walsh prepare? Right. And this led me to some of the business lessons and the life lessons is how much did Dr. Walsh prepare in medical school and after medical school and case studies and different opportunities and learning about learning his craft, right, as a surgeon, that he would run up against a case like mine, that he could not only try the surgery, but pull it off. I was later told that my case study became at the Cleveland Clinic, they study one surgery a quarter. And all their now Cleveland Clinic is one of the top 4 hospitals in the world. I was told that my case study, Dr. Walsh's surgery on me, became a case study for their entire surgery department because of the complication. And so at the end of the day, you realize so much of that was out of my control, Brett, right? So much of it was not up to me. It was not decisions that I made or things I did or couldn't do. It was just so much about being blessed and lucky in that moment, right? Yeah. That I was in the right place with the right surgeon at the right time. And again, that's another lesson that I take back in business. Like when you're doing business, whether it's real estate, whether it's e-commerce, whatever business you're in, that when the deal of a lifetime comes across your desk, if you're not ready, prepared, you've trained yourself, you've gone through all the trainings, you've gotten ready for that moment, there's always going to be an element of risk in that decision to start that business or build that business or execute that deal or do a JV partnership or whatever it is. That if you're not ready and prepared, you can't be daring in taking that risk, because every business decision is a risk. You can't make that decision and say, all right, I'm ready. Like, I know I've underwritten this thing. I know I can do it. That's essentially what Walsh did on the operating table. Was he was so prepared. He said, let's go. Let's try this. Let's try to save this kid's life. And he did.
Wow.
I take those lessons with me every single day.
Yes. And I was on a podcast the other day, and this one guest was talking about the unseen hours. And that's where you're talking about, how many hours did Dr. Walsh spend practicing, preparing for that moment? He just doesn't show up one day and it's game time. It's like no one sees the unseen hours of all the work that goes into any business, any craft. And I think that's just a lesson that in and of itself, you guys are out there. Like sometimes I get complacent, or I'm like, oh, I don't want to do the basics anymore because I'm past all that, right? But sometimes you got to get back to the basics and practice, so when time does come, you just can do it confidently. So I always want to ask this question, especially people that have faced something like this, faced their own mortality, and it's just always interesting. I just want to hear your perspective on it because you have done this, but during this time, so you're facing death, you're facing mortality. Obviously, you've had a lot of success, worldly success, and you talked about your faith too. But What was your thoughts on that success, the money, all of that stuff during this time? Like what's your perspective on that?
Like even though at that time, Brett, we had done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of wholesale deals and flip deals. We had held massive live events in Vegas and Dallas with 350, 400 attendees. And all I could think about is, man, I really screwed this up. Like I'm not getting sick and screwing up that business, but I did it all wrong. The things you learn when you get into real estate. I know, Brett, real estate, you had a super successful podcast around real estate in the past. We all learned Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Well, what did Rich Dad, Poor Dad teach us? What did Robert Allen teach us in Multiple Streams of Income? What did, Carlton Sheets teach us? If you bought the Carlton Sheets courses, it was all about cash flow. Ultimate freedom and real true wealth comes from cash flow and equity, not from flipping transactional stuff, because you don't own anything when you flip. So I realized at that time I had screwed it all up because I didn't own anything. I had a few rentals, a small portfolio, 15, 20, whatever. Didn't matter, right? That didn't pay the bills. Right? And so I realized that if I was now going to rebuild it, I was going to rebuild it by getting all the funding. So I really started to dive in, like Dr. Walsh, studying his craft. I studied the craft of raising private money. I talked to securities attorneys. I bought every course I could. I went through every training. There's a ton of misinformation, by the way, back then on private money, whether it was a security, whether it wasn't a security. But I did everything I could. I studied, I read blog posts. I listened to some podcasts. That was even before major podcasting was a thing, but there were a few that were out there. And I listened to everything I could about raising private capital, because I thought if I'm ever going to do the deals the right way, I've got to be good at raising money and buying larger assets and buying more larger rental portfolios or apartment buildings. It's exactly what I did. And I got really good at it. And Brett, the reason I loved it so much is because then I could go back on my financial planning start. The start that I got, and watching my father as an entrepreneur, I became a financial planner originally, was doing that for a few years, was very good at it. And then I gave it up to get into real estate. Well, now going back to raising capital was so much about like being a financial advisor. So I was put into that industry as a financial advisor to learn that for that time, which then served me over 10 years later to be really good at raising private money. So I got to the point where I'm like, I'm going to be really good at this. And I was funding all of my own deals, and I was funding deals for friends of mine. I was JVing with friends of mine with none of my own money. So much so that I started a private equity fund. We started funding deals out of a private equity fund. We were doing lending and joint venturing out of a private equity fund. So much so that led to then people coming to me and saying, hey, Josh, you have all this equity of all this cash you've raised. You have $30 million, $40 million. Can you invest in my apartment deals? And then all of a sudden, we got into a situation where we were investing equity in apartment deals. We were co-syndicating, co-sponsoring deals. And then that now led me to today, where we have almost 4,000 units of apartments and a $300 million portfolio. You look all the way back. The interesting thing, Brett, is that decision to get into financial planning, following my dad's footsteps of entrepreneurship, is what led me to recovering from pancreatic cancer and focusing on raising capital, which led me ultimately to where I am today. I've got 450 units of apartments that we're buying and closing on by the end of the year. It's $40 million of additional value that we're buying. And so much of it is the preparation that went in 25 years ago as a financial planner, or 10 years ago when I survived cancer, that finally it feels like we're making it. Finally, I feel like it's like, and we've had a lot of success, but now it's like, now it feels like it should have from day one. Right. Yeah. So where it all happened.
No, that's awesome. And I love that's just a lesson, because here you are, you have been really, really successful. And I've flipped a lot of houses, hundred thousands of houses, and I just started developing, my own portfolio, my own cash flow, because I was the same way. Like if something ever happened, like you don't have anything, right? And then we talk about the new generation of entrepreneurship, where talk about that a little bit more about, your dad coming home, leaving at 7, getting home at 7, And that was kind of the old way. And this is the new generation of entrepreneurship. So talk to us about what your life is like and what does that mean? What's the definition of that to you today?
Yeah, sure. So entrepreneurship to me comes down to a couple key themes. First of all, nobody's coming to your rescue. Okay. When you sign up to be an entrepreneur, you bet on yourself. It also means that you cut off all of the backup options, the backup plans. And you're willing to completely bet on yourself, realize that nobody's coming to your rescue in exchange for personal freedom. To me, it's not about the money. It's not about money. It's not about cars. It's not about how many millions, tens of millions of dollars I'm worth. Who cares? What it means is that I can leave work early at 3:30 so I can take my kids to volleyball at 4 and coach volleyball when none of the other parents could be there. I could be the dad that can coach volleyball early. When my kids were younger and they needed a dad to do recess duty, that I could do the recess duty at like from 10:30 until 1:00 when none of the other dads were there. When there were times when my kids were younger, again, you could volunteer at the school. They had this thing called centers where they had like different little craft stations every Friday. I was always one of the only dads that was there. That to me it's the exchange of I'm going to bet on myself, realize that nobody's coming to my rescue, realize that I'm 100% responsible and accountable to my own life now. These are all the lessons I learned from my dad. So lessons I learned from surgery that ultimately said, I'd rather do that and fail, but still have the personal freedom of time, freedom of relationships, and ultimately now freedom of money. That was what entrepreneurship was about. So if you're fighting for that personal freedom, you're an entrepreneur. That's the definition. That's what you're trying to do. And there's so many lessons that I learned along the way. Like there's so many things that you have to do as an entrepreneur to be successful. And like one of them is that, and I tell so many people this, like the business of business is people, right? If your business isn't growing, you got the wrong people. If your business isn't as big as you want, you need different people. Because the people, you might need money, but the people will help you find the money, right? The money doesn't find the people. The people find the money if you're short of cash. So everything is about people. And so we're in a constant battle now. It's warfare to find and recruit and partner and joint venture with the best people. I've had amazing partnerships that have worked out really well because they were great people. I've had partnerships that I thought were going to go really well that didn't, because that operator or that boots on the ground sponsor didn't fulfill their job. They were the wrong people, right?
Exactly.
Those lessons now, it's not like I'm 100% responsible for my own life. Nobody is coming to my rescue. But if I want to grow any kind of substantial business, it's about people. It's about bringing in, whether it's JVs, whether it's employees, staff, whatever it is, I've got to seek out the best people. I'll give you another example, Brett. Just 4 months ago, we bought 450 units of apartments. We bought those. We had 100 vacancies that we inherited when we bought those, 100. And for about 2 months, we were struggling to find and bring on and hire contractors. We just fought and scratched and clawed to interview every contractor we could, big, small, commercial, residential, didn't care. I was going to go find contractors to help us turn these apartment units. At the end of the day, finally interviewed and hired the right guy. He goes by Moose. His company is Art Development, but he goes by Moose. General contractor. And Brett, I swear to God, in the last 60 to 90 days, we have turned 75 full hard turns. You're talking about $8,000 to $9,000 a unit. We've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars because we found the one right person.
Wow.
Right? It's about business. It's about people. It's about finding and locating and working with those people. That to me is so big. That's another lesson I've learned along the way of being a great entrepreneur is, look, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room. I don't know shit about construction. But if I find the right guy to do that job, that's going to allow me to ultimately get to my goal, whatever that is.
No, I love that. It's a people business. I think every business is a people business. And obviously, you've learned a lot of these lessons through the challenges of your life, and you've talked about your dad a lot. I know that your dad had passed, right? And he was your first entrepreneurship mentor. And just talk to us about that. So your dad, he said he taught you a lot. He taught you what to do and maybe some things that you didn't want to do either. Maybe some other lessons. But what was it like? You went through this cancer, your own mortality. You're losing your dad the last year, and how's that changed you a little bit, or how have you reflected upon that and the lessons that he taught you?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think it's so many ways my dad did it right. He was always there. I remember being in college and I played college football, right? So on Saturdays when you played varsity, everybody was there. There were thousands, tens of thousands of people that would come to our games. Mm-hmm. But when you played JV as a freshman, believe it or not, many people don't know this, there's a JV program for college football that nobody goes to.
I didn't even know there was.
Yeah. I had a game as a freshman right out in Pennsylvania, and there's very few people there. We played on this terrible grass field. We were the freshmen, like nobody cared about us. And it was raining, pouring. Dad was there. The game was on a Monday at 3:30 in the afternoon in Pennsylvania. So he drove 2.5 hours on a Monday when most other parents, dads, were locked up in their corporate jobs and could not get away. And they all missed the game. There were probably 80 kids on my freshman team. 75 of them had nobody there. And my dad was one of them, right? And so, when I looked back at that lesson, I wanted to create a life and a business that would allow me to have that same personal freedom. And sure, my dad might have gone back to work. He might have worked late that night. He might have worked till midnight, 2 o'clock to make up for it, but he had the personal freedom to just pick up and leave. That was one of the great lessons. The other thing I think that Dad always said was my dad was in an employee benefits business where everyone was fighting over price. And Dad told me, he's like, just listen, Josh, service always trumps price. If you want to charge more, your service has to be impeccable. Right? So now as somebody that raises and recruits a lot of private money, we manage about $80 million of private money. We got about 40 million of it deployed right now. And people could go lots of places to get a better return than they can get with me. But because I answer the phone when they call, because I call people back, because I send people gifts out of the blue, because we create amazing quarterly reports with pictures and video and all kinds of feedback on what's going on at the properties, the good, the bad, and the ugly, service trumps price. And so people come back to me over and over to invest. I got guys that started investing with us 50 grand, 100 grand, that now have $1.5 million with us, right? Why? Service trumps price. People can go a lot of places to get return on investment, crypto, cannabis, real estate, e-commerce business, you name it. You can go a million places. People are investing with you. People are investing in you, right? Another lesson, again, I think that my dad taught me, didn't even know he was teaching me, was that my dad's business was valued off of cash flow, right? And then my partner, Glenn, in our business now, he brought this up many times. He said, look, when you're on Wall Street and you're looking at how companies are valued, they're valued based off of a multiple of income, but that income is the multiple is even higher if the income is booked based on a continuity. Right? So many people are just into the big hit, the next wholesale deal. I'm going to wholesale this apartment building and make 300 grand. Actually, what you should have done is bought the apartment building and made $10,000 a month for the next 10 years. Wow. That's more valuable than the $300,000 up front. And so Glenn said, look, let's only invest in things that produce cash flow. Let's only invest in things that will produce long-term value, whether it's selling products that people pay for on a monthly basis, or mastermind groups that people pay for on a monthly basis to be a member, or whether it's investing in buying apartments and rental properties that people pay to live in on a monthly basis. All of those different businesses, e-commerce businesses where people are on a subscription model that people pay for. Why do you think every e-commerce business offers you the discount if you subscribe monthly? Because their company is worth more if you as a customer subscribe. And let's say it's $25 a month. that's worth more to a buyer, to a private equity company that might come in and buy that e-commerce business. It's worth more. My dad's business was based off of monthly premiums. His clients paid monthly for their benefits, and my dad's company was worth multiple X. And so when I was flipping properties at the beginning, it was all about the big hit right now. But then guess what I had to do? Next month, I had to go do it again, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cancer and meeting my partner, Glenn, and I've known him forever, but we finally reconnected in 2014. And my dad's lessons of invest for cash flow, like that all I finally put that together. Even though I learned it from freaking Rich Dad, Poor Dad when I was 20 years old, I finally started doing that about 7 years ago. And my balance sheet, our income has skyrocketed, really, especially the last 3 or 4 years. And so invest for cash flow now, invest and find the absolute best people, take 100% responsibility for your life. The last lesson, Brett, I think that's really important is look, if you're going to grow a business, you have to use technology as a weapon. Okay. In my business, we say to our employees, if it's not in the software, it didn't happen. Right? Because if you're going to share information across dozens or hundreds of employees, potentially, if you own 4,000 units, we got multiple property managers, multiple CapEx crews. We got 3 different partners. I'm the majority owner of the business, but I've got 2 junior partners. We can't just get on the phone or send an email and share all of that information. It's impossible. The only way to do it is jam it all into software. If it's in a software, then anybody can find that information. And then you can scale. People can find that information on their leisure at their time when it's right for them. And then you can grow the business from there, right? So any kind of software that you can use to adopt, to recruit investors, to manage your people, whatever that is, adopt it, use it, and force your staff to use it. Because if not, you're going to have a terrible, terrible time scaling.
I love it. I love it. So many lessons, guys, from Josh. Thank you, Josh, so much for just being vulnerable on today's podcast. I really appreciate that. I know you've gone through some challenges, and I'm just so amazed at your success, and thanks for lessons of your dad as well. And I want to give you an opportunity. I know you have a mastermind group. You talk about multifamily, people that might want to invest with your multifamily organization. Where can someone find you and that organization?
Just our main website, freelandventures.com. There you can find our portfolio. You can see all the buildings that we own. You can look up a lot of our videos. You can request to get more information as a passive investor or possibly get in the mastermind. So just our main website, freelandventures.com.
Awesome. We're going to put that in our description on the Brett Snodgrass YouTube channel, guys, so check that out. And Josh, I always like to end every podcast with a fire round. So I have 4 questions for you. So
all right.
Just name the first thing that comes to mind. So best book recently read?
Who Not How.
Dan
Sullivan.
Sounds good. Favorite thing that you get to do in your business?
Raise money. I love to work with investors and raise capital.
Awesome. Best advice you were given by a mentor? You probably already mentioned it, but.
Look, I think probably the best advice I ever got was actually from Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank. He came to one of my events, spoke, we got to connect and meet. And this whole idea of nobody's coming to your rescue, I had heard that so many times before, but Kevin really, really pounded on that. Like, no one's coming to your rescue. Business is war, right? That's Kevin's style. And Kevin and I had the fortunate time to spend hours together off stage, just in a green room and just kind of preparing for the event. A lot of that, him reiterating that no one's coming to your rescue, Josh, you got to do it on your own. Big piece of advice for sure.
Awesome. That's great. All right. Last one. Favorite family memory this past year?
Favorite family memory this past year? Probably look, every summer we disappear for about 3 to 6 weeks and we go to Florida. And we rent a house and we just kind of disappear. We get away. This past summer, my daughter played in an AAU volleyball tournament. So we went down to Orlando, right? There's 500, 600, 700 teams there, thousands of people. My daughter's team, 2 days before the tournament, is told that they're not registered. They can't go. We all have plans. We have houses booked. We have flights booked. The club forgot to register them. They're a bunch of seventh graders, right? They're wrapping up their seventh grade year. They're told, okay, the day before we're about to leave, they're said, hey, you can go to the AAU tournament, but you got to play up. You got to play up against the eighth graders. And we're like, oh, great. We're going to go down there. She's going to totally get crushed. It's going to be the most boring 4 days ever. Well, here, they played out of their minds for 4 days. They actually placed like 39th out of 200 in their age. And for me to that younger, smaller team compete against the older kids, it's just an amazing memory this past summer.
That's amazing. That's amazing when you can play up like that. I remember, I think when I was in the 6th grade, we only had 6 guys. I played basketball on our basketball team. We only had 6 guys. We had one guy get sick, and one guy I think got kicked off, so we had to play 4-on-5. And
really?
I think we won some games. So anyways, that's fun. Good stuff.
Young kids, man, when young kids are put to a test that they're not expecting, and then they just absolutely show up. Like, so cool, dude.
That's awesome. Sounds good. Well, this is a wrap, Josh. Thank you so much for being on the Brett Snodgrass podcast today. Appreciate you, man. Guys, we're going to put, again, all of the links in our show notes on the Brett Snodgrass channel. And thanks again, Josh. Wish you all the best, man.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me on. This was a blast.
Thank you so much for checking out the Brett Snodgrass channel. If you like this video, please slam on that like button. And if you really like it, then subscribe to our channel here. And remember to leave us a comment below, and I'm going to try my hardest to reply to all the comments. Thank you guys so much. This is why I do what I do. Every single week, I come out with content that focuses on success, freedom, and living out your purpose. Thank you guys so much. See you next time.